Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. We're at December 1st. The 25 days of Christmas countdown has begun. So turn on your freeform and everything, and also turn on this podcast too. It's me, Omar, of course, after a long layoff with my good friend and co-host Jackson. Jackson, how's everything doing?
Yeah, man, everything's going good. Been a busy last few weeks, so we unfortunately had to skip rivalry week with the holiday and all that. But you know what? We're right back at it. It's conference championship week. We've got plenty of games to talk about, even though it's maybe not the depth that we're used to. But man, I'm excited.
No, I am too. I mean, it's just playoff season too, in all levels of college football. You got FCS, D2, D3, heck, even NAIA. It should be a great time. And of course, this weekend too, you got D2 bowl games. But yeah.
Absolutely, man. And speaking of playoffs, the major news broke today. We are expanding to a 12-team FBS college football playoff starting in the 2024-2025 season. Of interesting note, I saw, Omar, the national championship game for 2025 has been pushed back to January 20th. So that kind of answers our question. When is the national championship going to occur? Are we going to push everything back earlier and make a week zero more of a week one? We have our answer. January 20th. It's going to be late January from now on that we end up playing the national championship. So excited to finally have an answer to that. I think that was one of the biggest burning questions of this expanded playoff. So that's always good to know.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, with that news, with it being an NFL game night, no college football games on tonight. There probably won't be an AF and a wild card Monday Night Football playoff game. So that's probably going to be a short-lived experiment. Uh, so it's kind of strange, but we'll see what happens.
That is going to go down as one of the more like fascinating sports television facets, I guess, that the brief Monday Night Football, like a wild card game, that's going to be, like you said, a short experiment, but it's been fun while it lasted. So
It was, yeah. But yeah, I guess without further ado, let's start off with our first segment, of course, the HBCU Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch. It's crazy that we're almost 2 weeks away from the HBCU Pigskin Showdown. And I'm excited for it. And they're still making additions. My addition was added to the game today. So Jackson, why don't you start us off with your HBCU Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week?
absolutely, man. So for my HBCU Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch, I've got Jalen Jones, the guard slash tackle from Mississippi Valley State. He's actually a Jackson State alum that transferred over to Mississippi Valley State. So I'd love to see Dion and Jerry fight over maybe who gets to claim him on the graphics during the Pigskin Showdown. Man, he probably has my favorite highlight reel of almost any offensive lineman that I've ever seen on his Twitter account. It's just 2.5 straight minutes of him just being a bully to everyone that he's playing against, right? And my favorite part, there's a little pancake emoji in the top right corner, counting like how many pancake blocks it is throughout the duration of the highlight video. And just before the video's conclusion, there's a vintage IHOP commercial advertising. It's like $1.59 IHOP breakfast, and just talking about basically just how much of a guy that loves to have pancake blocks, right? And I wish we could have seen maybe an NIL deal with IHOP. That could have really gone over well. But yeah, man, the Memphis native, he actually declared for the 2023 NFL draft earlier this week. So congratulations to Jalen on that, obviously. From a scouting perspective, right, 6'4", 305, plays mostly on the left side. Most of what I saw of him was at guard, but has some experience at tackle too. Man, you just really see the extremely strong hands that he has to latch on to anyone, and then has tree trunks for legs, man, where he can really lock and push, and just a bully, just a competitor. Fun to watch, checks a lot of boxes for offensive linemen. I didn't really get to see him. There just wasn't enough of a sample size of him being like a pulling guard, or how agile he is, or more of his footwork. So I'm not even going to say that that's a concern. I just like don't have an informed opinion on it. So would love to see that from Jalen. Obviously, I know Coach Williams, Coach Grove, they're going to get him ready, obviously, for the National Football League. And we've got a bunch of NFL teams that have confirmed their attendance for the Pigskin Showdown. So a lot of eyes are going to be on Jalen. a lot of teams that could use some help in the interior line, man. I mean, right guard is the new left tackle, it seems like, in the NFL. So you can get away from exterior pressure. You can't get away from interior pressure. It's just right in your face and ruins the whole play. So excited to see Jalen show out and continue to do his thing and at the HBCU Pigskin Showdown.
Yeah, I mean it's great to see Jalen along with teammates Ja'Cory Rankin, who I applauded as my HBCU Big Ten Showdown Player of the Week a couple weeks ago, and Ronnie Thomas too for the Mississippi Valley State Delta Devils. I mean, talk about a talented 1-in-10 team, and I'm not trying to be funny or or snide, but it's just like this team had a lot of talent, as you can see in the Pigskin Showdown, a lot of pro prospects, and it's good to see them. Like it's good to see them cap this year. What's been a disappointing year for Delta Devils fans, and again, like I said a couple weeks ago, it's just so that's what these All-Star games are for. I mean, not just for the players, but for the fans to see their guys play on national television. And just kind of like have one last time to wear their school's helmet. I wouldn't say jersey because it's an all-star game, but wear the school's helmet in a game.
And man, that's a legitimate thing that we've talked about on here before. We're not making jabs at anyone. It's like this is a good 1-in-10 football team. It's possible, man. Like you can say that where the record doesn't reflect it, but like records can be deceiving, man. You have to look at it, and we've talked about it goes the other way around, right? Some deceiving undefeated teams, or at least teams with very decent looking records. So record isn't everything. You can have a decent season and it still finish under 500, right? A lot of that is how momentum is built for the next year. So obviously MVSU going to be missing some veterans going into the next level, but still excited to see where they end up next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like the SWAC East is has been pretty loaded, of course, with Jackson State. I mean, what more is there to say about Alcorn State too? Traditional power, but maybe one of these days, Alcorn State will find themselves back in the conference championship talk, back to their Jerry Rice and Willie Totten glory days. So I'm going with another unorthodox position for my player of the week. You got to say it's great. It's good to see that the HBCU Pigskin Showdown is a global game because we have an Australian player playing in the HBCU Pigskin Showdown. Yes, we have Philip Richards, punter for Howard, an Aussie punter playing in the HBCU Pigskin Showdown, just invited today, and he's had a nice year. Well, first he's had a well-traveled career. He's an Eastern Kentucky transfer. Had a great career at Eastern Kentucky. This year went to Howard as a grad transfer, punted 47 times with a long of 57, 37.8-yard average, and he had 15 inside the 20 and 13 fair catches with 7 50-yard bombs. And he also does kickoffs. He kicked off twice for the Howard Bison. So that versatility, it's funny. Like when you say punters, it's hard. It's weird that when you say versatility, but you want guys like Thomas Morstead. Guys like I should say guys like Thomas Morstead are novelties in the way that not only do they contribute in the punt game but in the kickoff game as well. I'm not sure if Morstead is still handling kickoff duties for whatever team he's on, but definitely a huge asset for any team. But yeah, Philip Richards, a pretty good punter for the Howard Bison. I saw him play, of course, in person when they played Harvard in the Truth and Service Classic. Had a solid game, 4 kicks, a long of 42, had a fair catch and went inside the 20. Really kept Howard in the game until late. But what can you say? The HBCU Pigskin Showdown is a global game, and we got a guy from down under, booting balls, and he's going to get some work because these All-Star games, it takes offenses a while to get going, a lot of time for them to get that chemistry right and put points on the board. So hopefully you'll be seeing a lot of Philip Richards on December 17th on CNBC.
Yes, Omar, we're pulling for a lot of punts in the game. That's exactly what we're hoping for. But yeah, in all seriousness, I think how all-star games handle special teams is maybe one of the more fascinating aspects about them. How you see a lot of these guys that are playing, if you're not playing in the Reese Senior Bowl, you're probably going to be making your money on special teams at the next level, right? So at least if you make it in the National Football League. So I'm very interested to see how Coach Grove and Coach Williams handle the special teams side of things. I know that they're firm believers in that special teams is 1/3 of the game, right? So I would expect to see some intensity on those. But obviously, not every all-star game has that mentality. I know in the Hula Bowl last year, there was no one participated except the kickers, if I remember correctly. So I'm excited to see how they handle that. And punting is 1/3 of the special teams phase, right? So Omar, we can go ahead and move on
Well,
to
before we move on really quick, I just want to say, you mentioned the Hula Bowl. Kickers were involved, but they did have punters as well. And I thought it was just so refreshing to see the punters go with no rush at all and just boom kicks. Like one of the punters last year was a Tommy Heatherly, sorry, not Lou Gross, a Ray Guy finalist. And just to see him and I forget the other punter, but him and both punters just boom kicks over and over, it almost felt like a skills competition. So I think it's cool. But I'm also a huge degenerate. So
it is, man. It looks like the NFL Combine out there where they're just kicking and no rush, and you just kind of get to see their true athletic ability, right? So
exactly.
absolutely. Omar, we are a college football awards podcast after all, right? So it's only fitting that we do talk about a college football award. As we've got only one set of games that really count left in the year, then I'm going to go ahead and or we're going to go ahead and talk about the Heisman Trophy, right? The end all be all in college football awards. So Omar, I don't think we talked much about format of this, but I'd love to hear kind of who you think is going to win, maybe who you think who deserves to win, some names that should be up there that aren't, some names that are up there that shouldn't, and go from there.
So I decided, go a little reality TV route. I named five. I named my five finalists. So
Okay.
it's always strange in terms of finalists. It just depends on how the writers vote. If the race is close and there's a lot of guys in the mix, you'll see six finalists like you saw in 2013. If the race really isn't close and it's kind of like, this guy and a couple other guys who had good seasons, we'll invite them to New York. You'll see three finalists. Like I'm trying to think which year, 2012. 2012 is probably the one that comes on top of my mind where you had Manti Te'o, Colin Klein, and Johnny Manziel as Heisman Trophy finalists. So I chose five, kind of like in the middle, where I kind of see this going. I kind of see it as it's not exactly a runway. It's been a very quiet Heisman race where it's like I'm not sure if the front runner had a Heisman moment, which if I were to pinpoint their moment, which I guess I'll give away who I think is going to win at this point in time. I have Caleb Williams winning it all, and I think his game-sealing touchdown against Notre Dame was his Heisman moment. And if you just look at Williams, he has the best stats out of pretty much any quarterback that's in the mix. He's got 3,712 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, 3 picks. That like the low mistakes is huge. 351 rushing yards as well and 10 touchdowns. And I will say this, like seeing Caleb Williams in person, driving down to making the 5-hour drive to Tucson with my dad and brother and seeing them play Arizona, I will say his game is exciting, if not frustrating, because the man will not check the ball down. But maybe that's what wins you Heisman Trophy. He does not check the ball down. He's probably one of the best scrambler in the country. So I got Caleb Williams one because his stats are superior, and USC's triumphant return to the playoff is probably a story that writers will hold near and dear to their heart, because writers are the ones that vote for this award. So I think that's one that'll get them cushy. As I'm gonna round out my next top five. I have Max Duggan. I think he's definitely gonna get a invite to New York City. He's also got 3,000 yards in the year, 29 picks, 3 touchdowns, 294 rushing yards on the ground, and 5 touchdowns, and an undefeated TCU with him at quarterback, with the story of him being benched at the start of the year, not even being the starting quarterback, but him coming back and leading TCU to an undefeated record. And I think he has a Heisman moment too. I think the game-winning drive against Baylor is definitely his Heisman moment for sure. Definitely saved TCU's season and playoff resume. So I got Doug at number 2, but it's like his stats aren't as impressive as Williams is, and I think that'll kind of play a role too. And given the fact that Williams has played, consider he played against UCLA, in a huge game against DTR, pretty much outdueled DTR in that one. They have trying to think who else they have wins against. Well, they'll have a win against Utah, but just huge competition. He has Oregon State as well, a come from behind victory against Oregon State, who is looking like probably like they got next in the Pac-12. So I think Williams' resume and stats are definitely better. I got CJ Stroud at number 3. And for me, I could have gone either way between CJ Stroud and Hendon Hooker, because I thought it would have been unfair to boot CJ Stroud from my finalist list. just over a game against Michigan where he had, because again they lost to Michigan last year, or yeah, they lost to Michigan last year, and he wasn't kicked from the Heisman finalist list. And again, he threw for over 300 yards in that game against Michigan. He made some mistakes, but CJ Stroud has been lights out the rest of the season with 3,700 yards, or excuse me, 3,340 yards, 37 touchdowns, and 6 picks. So I just didn't think it was fair just to boot him based off of one game. Coming at number 4 for me, I have Chase Brown for Illinois. This one was hard for me again. Like I could have swapped out Blake Corum, but I think Blake Corum's injuries against Ohio State, where he pretty much has a 10-game season, as sad as it is. He has a 10-game season, yet Corum is over 1,400 yards. And the two, I really think the 2-game stretch against Ohio State and Purdue would have won him the Heisman Trophy. And that's the saddest part of it, because we know that the Heisman Trophy is such a quarterback dominated award now that we have to cherish every single time we get a running back that's in the mix. Like the Kenneth Walker era of last year was just so great, especially against Michigan when he had that huge game against Michigan. We're like, yeah, we're getting a running back that's not from Alabama to win the Heisman. Like, how amazing is that? And then, Ohio State happened. So I got Chase Brown instead. He's got 1,600 yards. He's carried the ball over 300 times. He has 13 total touchdowns and 240 receiving yards. And I think the difference between Blake Corum and Chase Brown is, like, we saw with Blake Corum that the Michigan offense, and especially the Michigan run game, is just fine without Blake Corum, because Donovan Edwards had over 200 yards. Like, I looked at this guy, I'm like, why isn't he starting? Just kidding, obviously, but the Michigan run game is just fine. I'm not sure you can say the same for Illinois. I don't think Illinois would be a bowl team without Chase Brown. No disrespect to Tommy DeVito, but like, you see how many times Chase Brown's gotten the ball. And so for my 5th guy that I would invite to New York, this one may be a shocker and it's definitely a hot take, but I got Tyjae Spears for Tulane. And I think Tyjae Spears has probably as good a Heisman moment as anyone in the 5 I mentioned, because you look at the stage. Black Friday at noon against Cincinnati. Cincinnati had not lost a home game since, I think, 2017. Yeah, since 2017 against Temple. Had not lost a home game in 5 years. And Tyjae Spears runs the ball for 35 carries for 181 yards in a game that sends Tulane to the American title game. And I think he'll have a big game as well against UCF. I mean, considering the fact that UCF struggled against Navy's triple option, I think Tyjae Spears will have another game where he has 30 carries or so to keep the ball out of John Rice Plumlee's hands. And I mean, heck, UCF is looking more vulnerable, like, by the week, because they lost to Navy. They almost lost the Warren I-4 to a USF school that hasn't won a game against a Division I school since, I think, 2019. Or sorry, not Division I, to an FBS school since 2019. So I think Tyjae Spears, if he has a big game, if he hits that 1,300-yard mark and also catches a few passes, I mean, I would invite him to New York. Of course, it's a hot take, but that's my top 5.
Definitely, man. I mean, it's always a hot take when you have anyone not from these playoff eligible schools going in, right? But hey, that conversation is about to change soon in a couple of years, so that might be a good thing. Honestly, man, for my front runner, I think you kind of have to go with the quarterback. He's second in passing yards, right? He's 1 touchdown behind the leading the leading passing touchdown leader. But he has 8 rushing touchdowns to make up for it, right? He's spreading the ball around, 7 receivers with at least 3 touchdowns. I mean, wait a minute. Sorry, that's Austin Reed. I don't think we're allowed to talk about him because he's in Conference USA. So never mind. Skip that. I don't think we can do that. But yeah, man, in all seriousness, I think as much as I would love to give it to another quarterback from Western Kentucky, I think Caleb Williams did kind of run away with it right there, right? The Heisman has not generated nearly as much interest as it has in years past. And I think that interest was maybe sparked when he struck a Heisman pose on Saturday Night Football against Notre Dame. So maybe he kind of gave it to himself in a Desmond Howard type of way, right? Where it's just kind of speaking it into existence. So going to go with Caleb Williams. Max Duggan, I think a lot is riding on this Kansas State Conference Championship game. Obviously, I think if he has a Heisman moment, it's going to be in that game. Or if he wins the Heisman, I should say, his Heisman moment will have come in that Kansas State Conference Championship game, just because TCU has had so many close games. He's played heroes so many times. if you're a hero every game, then you're not a hero at all, right? Or something along the lines of that. So, one guy I want to go over that I still see his name in the mix, and it's logical, but I disagree with it. Stetson Bennett, man. I think by definition of the Heisman, you can't give it to Stetson Bennett just because I don't think he's anywhere near the best player in college football. I think it's interesting that he's on a lot of these lists. How many games is Georgia winning because of Stetson Bennett? I think that answer is it's a very low number. If it's a number at all. I think you could put almost any of these guys at Georgia as a plug and play, and it would work out pretty well. And I'm not knocking Stetson Bennett. This should be he's in the conversation for one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I just don't think he's in the conversation for the best like player in all of college football, right? So I hope that Stetson doesn't get invited to New York selfishly as a Florida fan, but also I just don't think it's deserving. Man, another guy I want to talk about, Mike Penix, right? If Washington doesn't lose to Arizona State in early October, is he the front runner? Do you think?
Oh man. So for me, I don't think so because I have to point
Okay.
to another game where he got outplayed by Dorian Thompson Robinson. Like it's
Okay.
not just
All right,
Arizona
that's
State game.
fair. They won the
Yeah, but
game, but he did get outplayed by DTR. So that's fair.
I mean, no, actually,
Um,
no. Washington did lose that game to UCLA. They did
oh
lose to
no, never
UCLA.
mind. What am I talking about? Never mind. Yeah, that
But
was a
yeah,
good duel between those two. Yeah, that would be sorry, I was thinking that would be their lone loss if they had beaten Arizona State,
yes.
but they did not, so it's irrelevant. So my bad. Um Another guy, CJ Stroud. I don't really think we need to talk about CJ Stroud. Like he's had a phenomenal year, except for that terrible, really like a blowout loss against Michigan, right? Like we can call that a blowout loss, right? And that's going to be all kinds of conversations. Is a two-loss Alabama team that lost by a combined 4 points better than a one-loss Ohio State team who got blown out at home by their rival? So that's going to be a conversation. Uh, that we're gonna hear a lot. Buckle up, you're gonna hear it a lot in the next few weeks. And the last guy that I just want to kind of throw in, Chase Brown. Of course, he would certainly be deserving of a vote. But I want to throw in another running back, Dwayne McBride, the running back from UAB. He's either had 175 rushing yards or 2 rushing touchdowns in all but 2 games this year. What's really remarkable about Dwayne, though, is that his backup has 832 yards and 142 carries. That's over 500 yards more than Chase Brown's backup has. So that should really speak to Dwayne's quantity and quality of carries when he has a backup that's having damn near 1,000-yard season. So I just think that was interesting to know.
Yeah, I mean, Dwayne McBride is definitely a name that I thought of too, but it's again, it's like not only is UAB in Conference USA, but that's a 6-6 UAB team. Like definitely like the least sexy UAB team we've seen in recent years. And that's why they're going to the Bahamas. Like that's not a bad thing, but it's like, you're not going to see them in the New Orleans Bowl against Coastal Carolina or in a sexy matchup like that. But yeah, Dwayne McBride, it's just continuing that tradition of like great running backs like Spencer Brown, Jordan Howard, like UAB produced some running backs, and I mean, yeah, like great balance. I mean, that offense had some good balance too. Averaging looked like a little less than 200 yards per game passing the ball, which I'm surprised by just the sheer volume that they ran the ball with. But yeah, I like Dwayne McBride. But under Stetson Bennett point, I think it's very interesting, and it's something I like to call the Ken Dorsey effect, where Ken Dorsey, of course, the quarterback of those great Miami teams in the early 2000s. 2001, he had I think 26 touchdowns, and in 2002 he had 28 touchdowns. But in 2001 he came in third in the Heisman voting. In 2002 he came in fifth. It's funny too because in 2001 he came in third in the Heisman against Eric Crouch. Eric Crouch won the Heisman, of course, with Nebraska, who Miami would later beat in the title game. But I feel like that perception was kind of the same, where it's like this Miami team is probably the greatest college football team of all time. Where like the writers that were thinking this Miami team is the greatest team of all time. You put any quarterback in that offense, and they're gonna make it work. Or like on that team, like it doesn't have to be like a good quarterback. You put any quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over with the defense, then like they're gonna go undefeated. So I think Stetson Bennett is a victim of the Ken Dorsey effect.
Since we've nearly exhausted talk on the 2022 Heisman campaign, let's get a head start on 2023 and maybe get the transfer portal involved. Maybe a little bit of hardware breaking news here because as it was recently deleted, although I think it is still true. Alfonso Graham and the transfer portal, straight from his Instagram story. So something that we could see possibly next year if he gets on the right squad.
Yeah, maybe it just depends. I'm not sure where he'd go, honestly, but we'll see. I thought you were gonna talk about Kate McNamara. I was like, whoa, I'm like, that is a hot take. But nothing against
No,
Kate
that would be
McNamara. It's not Kate McNamara, it's the
no.
Iowa system. That's the problem. It's the Iowa system that's a problem. Not Kate McNamara is great, but
They take the O out of Iowa, man.
oh, they do.
That's yeah, that would not be deserving. But no, man, I'm just messing. Best of luck to Alfonso on wherever he goes. Would love to see him get some love at the FBS level. We've seen that earlier this year with who was it that we talked about during the spring season? From Washington,
Cameron Ward, yeah.
Ward,
Cameron
yeah,
Ward,
from
yeah.
Washington State. Yeah, get some love at the FBS level when he transfers. So yeah, man. So obviously we're used to having our games of the week. This is going to look a little bit different with it being conference championship week and the FCS playoffs also going on, then some Division II bowl games. So what we're going to do, at least how I'm going to do mine, are we're looking at one Power Five conference title that we're looking forward to watching, one Group of Five conference title we're looking to watching, and one assorted. Have your pick from that. So I'll go ahead and start off with my Power Five conference title. I'm looking forward to watching Kansas State versus TCU right at noon. Right. Do you think it's a realistic possibility we see the collapse of TCU in the beginning of the postseason as opposed to the end? Um, I only ask that because I don't foresee TCU winning a national championship this year. So it's inevitable that they have to lose at some point. And I'm curious if that'll start in postseason play as opposed to going into January. Um, I'll say this: if Max Duggan does win the Heisman, he needs this moment to be in this game, right? So I'm looking for possibly him to be, put TCU on his back, so to speak, if they do end up winning this game. But these are two very different teams than when they met earlier in the year, and obviously TCU got the best of that. Kansas State head coach Chris Kleiman talked about just how different the offense is since that first TCU game and how they couldn't get the ball back from TCU. TCU just really dominated the time of possession. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn did his thing in the first or rather did not do his thing in the first game, rather. He carried the ball only 12 times against TCU, which is well under his average for the rest of the year. I'm curious to see if Kansas State realizes just how critical Deuce Vaughn is to their success, right? And maybe even if they get behind a little bit early, how they really need to stick with the run game with Deuce Vaughn in order to carry them to victory. Will Howard, man, he finally has some experience under his belt. You're not just relying on he's relying on some experience now as opposed to it was his first game, right, against TCU the first time around. So looking forward to see him throw as well. He's only thrown one interception since that TCU game where he obviously threw one there. So excited to see this matchup. And it's definitely this conference championship weekend is lacking that top five matchup that we're looking to see, that we often see, especially in Atlanta. So I think this is the closest thing we're going to get to it. And I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point you make on Will Howard. I mean, Will Howard looks like a guy that can probably, I guess, become a late round draft pick. Excuse me, a late round draft pick like Skylar Thompson was this past year, and even started a game for Miami this year with all the quarterback injuries. There has been talk about Adrian Martinez coming back, but I don't think that'll happen. I think they'll stick with the hot hand with Howard. But Kansas State is a formula to upset teams like this. Like you go back to 2003. Oklahoma coming in number one ranked in the country in the Big 12 title game. They end up losing by 4 touchdowns to Kansas State. I don't think it'll be a blow, but Kansas State with a nice downhill run game with Will Howard running the ball well at quarterback as well. I think Kansas State is a formula to beat TCU, and they almost pulled it off earlier in the year if they only kept the lead. So I mean, again, that game is the game of the week, honestly. And game day is there, rightfully so. So definitely agree with that one. For my Power Five conference title game, uh, this was probably the least sexy conference title game of all of them, but I picked it because of what's at stake for one of the schools playing. You have Clemson versus North Carolina, and Jackson, we were talking beforehand about the last time North Carolina had won an ACC title. I thought Mac Brown won an ACC title in his first run as North Carolina coach. He didn't. It's been since 1980 that North Carolina has won ACC title, even a share of the ACC title. So a 42-year drought at stake here, and I think they have the tools to beat Clemson because this Clemson team looks they just happen they it's not the same Clemson team, to say the least. It's really hard to describe, but Drake May, I think he'll rebound from the past couple weeks that he's had. Drake May is probably going to be a Heisman finalist next year. Honestly, I mean, he looks like he has that Sam Howell type trajectory. Hopefully, he doesn't have the descent that Sam Howell did in 2021. But I mean, Drake May looks good, and this one should be a barn burner. The last time these two teams played in the ACC title game, 2015, Clemson came in undefeated, and then North Carolina came in with a 10-1 record, and they were a controversial, onside kick away from pulling off the upset and causing a huge panic within the playoff, having 2 1-loss ACC teams, to choose from. So I expect the game to be just as exciting, and I think North Carolina will pull it off. That game is Saturday Night Football at 7:30 Eastern on ABC. But yeah, what's not to love? You had some electric moments last year in the ACC title game. You had the infamous fake slide, in a game that people had no real New Year's Six implications beside just a conference championship. But Kenny Pickett put out the fake slide. So what will we see this year? I'd love to know.
Absolutely, man. You never that was an electric moment. That was maybe the most remembered moment from conference championship weekend last year. And it was in one of the lesser important Power Five games. So no, man, I forgot about that. Man, the Kenny Pickett fake slide. A game I believe you were there for live and in person to see the infamous moment, were you?
I was live and in person. Yeah, I was in Georgia at that time. So my friends and I decided to make the 2.5-hour trip and made some friends from Wake Forest fans.
Hardware on site for the fake slide. Awesome to see. I'll go ahead and go with my group of five conference title. I'm going to go with the Mountain West, man. Fresno State versus Boise State. Omar, we've given so much grief to Boise State, but imagine being a double-digit win group of five conference champion and not being talked about like they are, which is a legitimate possibility. I'm psyched to see what bowl they get if they win this one. I just want to ask you, what if they get like a narrow victory at UTEP, which obviously they lost earlier this year, and end the season 11-2 with losses to BYU? What would their in Oregon State rather? BYU and Oregon State. Do you think they'd be in contention for a New Year's Six bowl? Because there is no like one loss group of five team. It's certainly a conversation, right?
I think so. My thing is they would have a weaker resume than Troy would have, because Troy would have their conference championship win. Troy would have
Troy
beaten
isn't
South
even
Alabama.
ranked. The committee is not giving them the respect they deserve. Come on, man.
I'm saying that in the case, I think if they had a pick, they're like, if they definitely have a better resume, I think they have a better resume than UCF. I think Boise State would have a better resume than UCF, but it wouldn't be better than Troy, I think. Because the Mountain West is just weak. Like their best win is against Air Force, a 9-3 team, but after that, their resume hinges on 2 wins against Fresno State, an 8-win team, which is, it's not bad, but it's not like Troy. I mean, Troy's got a better resume comparatively against, they would have won against Coastal. They would have beaten South Alabama. South Alabama is an underrated win considering what they did against UCLA and the fact that they're also 10-2. They would have had that win as well. So I mean, I just think it pales in comparison, but again, I don't think so.
That's a fair point. I think Oregon State is a good loss, and apparently that's a thing, right, in the playoff era. So having good losses. So I don't know. It's something that at least it's a hypothetical that's at least interesting. But I'll let you go ahead and go with your group of five conference championship game of the week to watch.
Yeah, so we talk about droughts. That there is no drought that is worse on conference championship weekend than this one. It's been 54 years since Ohio has won a MAC title, and I don't want to jinx it, but that is definitely a game you should be watching. I mean, that game, of course, is going to be pit against the Big 12 title game. So I mean, people won't be watching, but that is probably the best storyline. And that's the thing.
It's
I'm
been
gonna go
one
on
and
my
a half
soapbox.
years since Toledo won a national championship, man. So a lot on stake. What?
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true. But it's like, again, it's like the thing. So I'm gonna go on my soapbox. The thing with the playoff, college football has become so playoff focused that we lose sight of storylines that are just innately awesome and just great to follow. Like Ohio not having a conference title for 54 years and being able to get one this weekend. But I mean, honestly, because we're so focused on the playoff, this game is like happening, in a vacuum. Essentially, it feels. And the thing with this one too, I think they have a good chance to pull it off, but this game is like the backup quarterback bowl, it seems like, because DeQuan Finn for Toledo has been sensational. He's had 500 rushing yards each of the past 2 seasons. He's injured. He might not play. His backup's playing with a broken non-throwing hand, so Toledo's banged up, and if Toledo hadn't been banged up, I think they would have had a much better season than they had. I mean, they're better than the record indicates. They're 7-5. Should be better than that too. Had some narrow losses to San Diego State, Western Michigan. Ohio also starting their backup. Curtis Rourke was sensational this year, over 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns. And Curtis could do something that his brother Nathan could not do, win a MAC title. So there will be some family bragging rights at stake. But CJ Miller stepped in essentially the MAC East title game against Bowling Green, had a passing touchdown, 196 yards. On the ground, had 3 touchdowns and 65 yards. So I think Ohio will be just fine on offense. It should be a close game. The MAC title game is always competitive. The MAC itself is always competitive. But I mean, again, like this game's kind of happening in a vacuum. But if you need a root for anyone, forget the playoff. Root for Ohio to win their first MAC title game in 54 years. So
That would be awesome to see, man. It's a lot of these streaks that can be broken. We talked about North Carolina, the real 1980 joke, right? And obviously Miami of Ohio with the opportunity to win a conference championship game, which would still be or it would be one more MAC title than Miami has ACC titles. So that would definitely be good to see. I'm going to go ahead and go with my FCS playoff game of the week. I'm going to go with New Hampshire at Holy Cross. Omar, I'll let you fill in a lot of blanks on this one. I know you're going to be watching this Saturday. Holy Cross didn't lose a regular season game all year, and they haven't lost one since early October of 2021. Last year, they ended the FCS playoffs with a 5-point loss on the road to Villanova, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they start off at home this year, and looking forward to hopefully see them get this one done.
yeah, so I mean, on the New Hampshire side, this is definitely a test. Anytime you play a CA, a Colonial Athletic Association team, a performance that was overshadowed this week was Dylan Laube for New Hampshire, who had 424 all-purpose yards against Fordham. Um, he'll be tough to stop for Holy Cross as well, but Matt Sluka again is having a great year. If Matt Sluka does not enter the transfer portal, I hope he does not, but he definitely has a case too. He's got the talent to go to a different school. If Matthew Sluka does not go to the transfer portal, he's a Walter Payton Award finalist, and this year it proved it as well. I mean, he really improved his game passing the ball. This year he has 2,303 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 3 picks. He's always played mistake-free football, had 5 picks last year, running the ball this year too. It was the same Matt Sluka running the ball. He had 918 rushing yards, and he might win the Golden Helmet for the best Division I football player in New England back-to-back years, which I can't remember the last time it's been done. I think it might have been Doug Flutie. But yeah, this game should be a good one too. And if the Patriot League wants to get respect, Holy Cross needs to win this one. As much I'm a huge Patriot League guy, but hearing everyone say that Holy Cross didn't deserve a seed, with them being in the Patriot League, it hurts, but they need to win this one. So that game should be exciting too. I mean, a great Northeastern matchup.
Absolutely, man. Well, those are my games to watch this week. Omar, anything else before we hop off?
Yeah, so I got a couple. So I got a couple more games to watch. So my playoff game is William Mary versus Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb won their first ever playoff game in their first ever appearance in the playoffs last week against Eastern Kentucky. They play a really tough test in William and Mary, who went 10-1 this year. Of course, they blew out Charlotte to open the year and turn some heads. It's William and Mary's first appearance since 2015, and they have a good defense that allows 20 points per game. John Pius leads it with 11 and a half sacks and 19 tackles for loss. John Pius may be a Buck Buchanan finalist when they announce the list too, because William Mary's 10-1, having a resurgent year, and he has 19 tackles for loss. He'll be tasked to stop Nari Gaither, who's had 1,030 rushing yards. on 6 yards per carry and had a great year for the running Bulldogs of Gardner Webb. So this one, I mean, if you want a story to track, I think Gardner Webb making a Cinderella run, which I think it's unlikely that they beat William and Mary, but if Gardner Webb makes a run to the quarterfinals or heck even the semis out of what's left of the Big South Conference, the Big South will have just 4 teams after this next season. Definitely a great story to watch out there for FCS fans. And probably the game of the week, the game they should have gone to this week, Valparaiso, New Mexico State. The New Mexico State Aggies took America by storm by beating Liberty, not just beating them, but beating them handily, 49-14 in Lynchburg. I mean, Liberty just looked disinterested in that game. Of course, Hugh Freeze took the job at Auburn, but I mean, a great game. Diego Pavia introduced himself to the country, had 214 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 125 rushing yards, and 3 touchdowns. And you can kind of see this New Mexico State offense look like what Minnesota looked like in the mid 2010s when Jerry Kill was coach of Minnesota, when they had Mitch Leidner running the ball very well at quarterback. They had a tough downhill run game. And the best news of the week was not just that this game got scheduled, but that New Mexico State will be picked above all 5 and 7 teams for bowls due to the unforeseen and tragic circumstances of their canceled game in San Jose State. They're going to pick New Mexico State above all the 5 and 7 teams. Good news for the Aggies, bad news for Auburn and UNLV. But I mean, just a great game. I mean, Valparaiso was 5-6 out of the non-scholarship Pioneer Football League. But don't write them off. I think they'll be competitive. They have a very strong run game that can steal possessions. They have Aaron Dawson this year, who's had a great year. He's ran for 1,187 yards this year, including a 99-yard touchdown, has 10 touchdowns this year. So expect Valparaiso to kind of, shrink the game, play some ball control, and, be competitive against New Mexico State. Hardware will be live there as I will be as I'm not going to say I'm a UTEP fan or NMSU fan. I'm a Borderlands college football fan being stationed down here in El Paso. I'm making the 1-hour drive up to Aggie Memorial Stadium, and hopefully there'll be a field rush because I'll be rushing that field. I don't care if it's an FBS team beating a non-scholarship FCS team. I mean, let's rush the field for that and just enjoy the moment. But that's the rest of my games of the week.
And hey, man, like I said, like maybe there isn't the quantity that we're used to for a regular college football week, but man, if you can expand your interest to beyond just the Power of 5, then there's plenty of football to watch. You just got to go and find it. And it's not that hard with ESPN Plus now either.
Nope, it's not that hard. I will note that this Valparaiso New Mexico State game will be broadcast by Bally Sports Arizona, the television home
Or that.
of the. Yeah, well, I mean, it's also on Flow Sports. I said the F word, but yeah, like it's on Bally Sports Arizona on Comcast New Mexico, and the Pioneer Football League as a whole has only had 3 games on linear television. I mean, they've had games streaming on ESPN Plus, of course, but being able to get on those regional TV networks is huge for that conference too, because they don't have a TV deal. They just piggyback off the TV deals of the Olympic sports that other conference members. But yeah, it's a huge game for both programs. But yeah, so much football to watch streaming, and it's just again Division II playoff streaming, got Division III playoff streaming, NAIA too. So much football to be had this late in the year. It's amazing.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, hey, looking forward to a weekend full of it. And seeing how this plays out, man. Selection Sunday coming up. We'll know pretty much everything we want to know by the end of next week, or by the start of the show next week.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm excited. Yeah. But I that's all I have, Jackson. You have anything else?
I'm good, man. Just excited for this week.
Yep, absolutely. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.